Well, the GOP primary has already seen more candidates join the race this week, but there's also been one notable potential candidate who is opting to stay out of the running this year. Let's get a state of the race. To do that, I'm joined by Julia Manchester, political reporter at The Hill. Julia, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you know I love when you're here, Julia, because we get a chance to talk all things politics. Former Vice President Mike Pence is now joining that crowded field of candidates vying for the Republican nomination. How can Mr. Pence break through when his former boss is at the top of the charts?
You know, it's a good question, Nick, because I think we're still figuring out what lane former Vice President Mike Pence wants to run in. Look, we know that there's tension between him and his former boss stemming back to that January 6th attack on the Capitol when Pence's life was literally put in danger. Since we've seen them very much separate themselves from one another. And, you know, Trump has very much attacked Pence, and Pence has, pushed back against former President Trump. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. But at the same time, it's interesting because former Vice President Mike Pence will be running on the accomplishments and part of the Trump administration, which he very well can do because he was vice president. So it'll be interesting to see how they differentiate themselves policy-wise. Now, one policy area where I could see them differentiating themselves is on a lot of these social and cultural issues, particularly on abortion. We know that Mike Pence has been very socially conservative. He very much chats with a lot of, runs in those very social conservative political activist circles, probably more so than Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump has a very strong footing in those circles. So for Mike Pence, I think he might try to peel away from that very socially conservative, maybe in many cases evangelical primary voting base. The question is it enough for him to get over the finish line to defeat someone like Trump? And at this point, that's going to be a tough hill to climb because we know that Trump is leading the field by double digits, and Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, is second place.
Yeah, and that may indeed be a Sisyphean task. Advisors close to the former VP say that Mr. Pence is the only traditional Reagan conservative in the race. And I don't think anyone questions his religious bona fides, but is that where the Republican primary voters really are right now?
Well, going back to Kelly's package just a minute ago, in Iowa, it certainly is. And I think you're seeing candidates like Ron DeSantis, for example, zero in on that message. It's no coincidence that in Iowa, they're talking about faith and those socially conservative values. But you bring up a good point, Nick. Outside of Iowa, when you go to a state like New Hampshire, for example, which is a bit more moderate, very libertarian among more conservative voters, that message may not land the same way. So I think it's certainly a part of the Republican primary voting bloc. The evangelical voting bloc has proven to be very powerful, very influential among Republicans. But there are many different types of Republicans, and we know that there are some Republicans that happen to be more moderate, more fiscally conservative focused, and that faith-based social conservative message may not fly the same way with them.
And there's no better example of how different the Republican Party can be displayed than in New Hampshire. Speaking of which, let's talk about Governor Sununu, who danced for a while with the idea, I may run, I may not, did every talk show there was, and now he says he's not going to jump into the race. He's saying that there's just too large of a field of candidates and that helps Trump win the nomination. Is he right?
I think he definitely has a point there. And we saw that former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, who was also seen as a potential 2024 pick at one point, made a similar argument. Look, if you go back to 2015 and 2016, there are so many similarities between the field then and the field now. You have, the number of candidates growing in the double digits. You have Donald Trump leading that field at this time. And if Trump can only get a plurality of votes while the rest of these candidates essentially cannibalize each other on the trail, then that puts Trump in a very powerful position.
Sununu says the candidates who still hover in the single digits by this winter should get out of the race and stop running to be Mr. Trump's vice president. Do you think candidates will do that when the time comes? Because those who remain in the race will need to shore up support from those donors.
They will need to shore up support from donors. And, we talk about, how far the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary are from now, 7, 8 months. But at the same time is very much running out.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation in your cable lineup. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-based, unbiased coverage.